I just wanted to go on this little baby rant about Rachel Zegler. She's the young woman that was cast as Snow White. It has proven to be Disney's worst investment ever in the history of Disney investments. I mean, they've gone through various scandals with this girl.
That movie was just like, she just couldn't stop.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged. I truly do believe that. There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion. The reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood. They're just not stable human beings. I would highly advise that you boycott this film, no matter how much your children love Snow White.
This just got personal. Snow White just got a makeover, and Candace Owens just grabbed a sledgehammer. Disney's latest attempt to reboot a classic has detonated into a firestorm of political outrage, box office chaos, and ideological trench warfare. And leading the cavalry charge? None other than Candace Owens, conservative firebrand and culture war commander-in-chief, who's now treating Rachel Zegler like the final boss of Hollywood wokeness. This isn't just a film flop, it's a manifesto meltdown, and Owens isn't holding back. Because when Disney goes woke, Owens goes scorched earth. So how did a fairy tale princess end up as the face of everything wrong with modern Hollywood? And did Candace Owens just do what no evil queen could? Kill Snow White's legacy with a single rant? Stick around. You're going to want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. 1. Candace Owens versus the House of Mouse. A fairy tale bloodbath.
So first and foremost, if you're going to be cast as Snow White, maybe appreciate the original Snow White and don't do a tour talking about how, essentially implying that it's wrong and backwards and it's not 1937, whatever. That was like her initial spree, and everyone was like, okay, do you want to be Snow White or do you hate Snow White? Do you want to destroy Snow White? They went way too woke. They ended up kind of changing the whole movie and said, never mind, we're going to shelve it and do it later.
Candace Owens was never going to let Snow White slide. Not in this economy. Not when Disney's golden goose is laying politically correct eggs and asking the audience to clap. For Owens, the 2025 Snow White remake was more than a cinematic failure. It was an ideological insult, a sacred childhood classic, gutted and stuffed with hashtags, rebranded for an audience that barely showed up. And at the center of it all, Rachel Zegler, a Gen Z activist in princess drag. Owens, whose career has been built on blasting liberal orthodoxy with the intensity of a Fox News fever dream, didn't need a formal invitation to enter the fray. With a smirk and a soundbite, she labeled the remake a woke catastrophe, slamming its feminist rewrite and identity politics casting like they were constitutional violations. "This isn't Snow White," she allegedly said during a live stream. "It's sleepy, dopey, and woke." Subtle? No. Viral? Absolutely. And in Owens' universe, the plot was obvious. This wasn't about art, it was about an agenda. Snow White wasn't just leading a CGI revolution of diversity dwarfs. She was the face of what Owens has long claimed is Hollywood's war on tradition. A Latina actress replacing a Germanic fairy tale figure? A prince erased from the story in favor of self-discovery? Owens practically lit the pyre herself, screaming, "This is what happens when you prioritize ideology over storytelling." But make no mistake, Owens wasn't aiming at Zegler alone. She was aiming at Disney's boardroom, Silicon Valley elites, every diversity consultant in a Burbank Zoom call. Zegler was just the perfect avatar, young, bold, unfiltered, and tweeting about Palestine between press junkets. For Owens, this wasn't personal, it was political. And she turned her platforms, her podcast, her Twitter X feed, her army of like-minded rage scrollers into a 24/7 anti-snow campaign. Forget Rotten Tomatoes. Owens made sure this film was certified scorched. Because in Candace World TM, every remake is propaganda, every actress is a spokesperson, and every box office bomb is proof that real America is done playing along. The princess that never stood a chance.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler probably thought she was taking on a fairy tale, not a full-blown firestorm. The casting should have been a coronation. A rising star, a diverse face, a modern voice leading Disney's next era of storytelling. Instead, it was a setup, Zegler's interviews, where she called the 1937 film creepy and slammed the prince's behavior as weird, went from edgy commentary to evidence in a culture war trial. And the judge? Candace Owens, in robes made of YouTube thumbnails and outrage. Zegler's unapologetic feminism, her calls for a leadership narrative instead of a love story, were sold as empowerment. But to critics like Owens, it sounded like an attack, not just on tradition, but on innocence. She's rewriting Snow White like it's a TED Talk, one Owens fan wrote online. Where's the magic? Where's the joy? Where's the kiss? Instead, we got Zegler in armor, metaphorically storming the patriarchy while the prince presumably swiped left off screen. But it wasn't just about the film. Zegler's off-screen persona, earnest, loud, political, became gasoline. When she tweeted "Free Palestine" and slammed Trump voters in the same breath, she didn't just alienate Middle America. She practically gift-wrapped talking points for Candace Owens' next podcast. And Owens delivered. Hard. Her takedown wasn't just about film critique, it was about what Zegler represented. A new generation of Hollywood elites, armed with moral certitude, unbothered by backlash, and clueless about consequence. Owens repeatedly pointed to the film's dismal box office as a referendum on all things woke. And while economic analysts saw marketing failures and post-strike fatigue, Owens saw karmic justice. When you mock tradition, audiences mock your ticket sales, she posted allegedly. The message was clear. This wasn't a flop, it was a moral victory. 3. Wokeageddon. Disney's fairy tale collapse in real time. By the time Snow White hit theaters in March 2025, it was less a release and more a reckoning. The premiere was so scaled down, it felt like a sentencing hearing. No press junkets, no influencer parade, just a studio trying to sneak a $270 million film into theaters like it owed someone money. And the returns? Brutal. 43 million domestic, 87 million worldwide, against a budget that could have rebuilt Cinderella's castle in gold. Candace Owens didn't just react, she celebrated. This was the moment she'd been priming her audience for. The death rattle of a legacy studio bowing to progressive gods and getting smited at the altar of consumer apathy. Her online commentary turned gleeful. One headline read, "Get woke, go broke. Disney's new Snow White bombs in theaters." Another, "No prince, no profits." Satirical? Maybe. Effective? Devastatingly so. And Disney? Spinning. They deployed damage control with the desperation of a Marvel Phase 5 rewrite. Insiders leaked that Zegler had been reprimanded for her posts. A new PR handler was assigned. There were whispers about freezing political talk in future contracts. And behind the scenes? Panic. The fairy tale had ended, not with a kiss, but a culture war casualty count. Owens' influence, whether direct or symbolic, was undeniable. She helped shape the narrative, not of a film that failed, but of a Hollywood that had finally gone too far. Snow White wasn't just a movie anymore. It was a meme, a movement, a post-mortem. And Owens? She was already sharpening her arrows for the next remake disaster. Because in her fairy tale, the only thing more satisfying than watching a woke film burn is lighting the match herself. 4. When Rachel Zegler, how a starlet became a symbol. If Owens was the arsonist, Zegler was the gasoline. It's hard to overstate how quickly Rachel Zegler's image mutated from Disney darling to ideological Rorschach test. Was she a brave voice of progress or an unfiltered Gen Z disaster wrapped in red carpet couture? The answer depends entirely on which echo chamber you called home. But one thing was clear. Zegler had become a symbol, and not the kind you want trending. Her defenders called her authentic. Her critics called her arrogant. But in a media landscape that thrives on digital tribalism, Zegler's every tweet became a flare in the sky. And Owens? She never missed a flare. Zegler's anti-Trump screed, "May Trump supporters never know peace," gave Owens a field day. That line alone became conservative media catnip, passed around like a sacrilegious relic. Owens used it to paint Zegler as not just out of touch, but actively hostile toward half the country. Snow White, but make her spiteful. And when Zegler posted Free Palestine, while her co-star, Gal Gadot, an IDF veteran, faced death threats for her pro-Israel stance, the narrative mutated into full-blown chaos. Suddenly, this wasn't just a bad Disney remake. It was a geopolitical morality play, with Zegler cast as the untrained activist and Gadot the silent, stoic counterpoint. Cue Owens again, reminding her audience that Disney didn't just cast a new Snow White, they accidentally ignited a global controversy. Zegler's eventual apology, "Hate and anger have taken us further from peace," came too little, too late. The damage was done. The moment for humility had passed, and the digital mobs had already moved on, not to forgive, but to feast. And while Zegler had support from the Hollywood progressive clique, shout out Ariana Grande and Jamila Jamil, always ready with a notes app and a halo, the broader audience had already voted. Not on X. At the box office, 5. Disney's derailed dream, when fairy tales collide with reality TV. Let's not forget who was supposed to be the hero here: Disney, the nostalgia machine, the castle in the clouds. But instead of magic, Disney served controversy. Instead of whimsy, we got a TikTok think piece in Tool. By the time Snow White premiered, the company looked less like the House of Mouse and more like the House of Misfires. Candace Owens didn't need to destroy Disney's vision. They did it themselves. From the beginning, this remake was a Frankenstein of contradictions. They scrapped the romance but kept the name. They cast a non-white lead in a story literally defined by skin white as snow, but forgot to write a new ending. They modernized the dialogue but left in talking mirrors. And the 7 dwarfs? Replaced by CGI magical creatures, following Peter Dinklage's criticism of outdated tropes. The result? No charm, no clarity, and apparently no audience. Owens pounced. She mocked the film's sanitized press rollout, its Instagram filter feminism, its refusal to actually say anything coherent. They're so afraid of offending anyone, they made a movie that pleases no one, she joked. Or maybe she wasn't joking. Hard to tell these days, when conservative takedowns get more views than the movies themselves. What should have been a triumphant reimagining became a corporate crisis. Disney's panicked pivot, canceling press events, silencing Zegler, and allegedly hiring a full-time reputation consultant only made things worse. It looked like damage control because it was damage control. The mouse had lost the narrative, and Owens gleefully picked it up, stomped on it, and mailed it back in a flaming envelope. Chapter 6. From Snow White to Snow Job, the theater of culture war. Here's the kicker. Candace Owens didn't need to win an argument. She just needed to frame one. And frame it she did, turning one actress, one remake, and one press junket gone wrong into Exhibit A in the trial of woke Hollywood versus the real world. It's less about whether she was right and more about how effortlessly she made the entire industry dance to her outrage tune. Zegler became the scapegoat, Disney became the fall guy, and Owens? She got the headline, the soundbite, and the victory lap, because in the theater of the culture war, optics are everything, and Owens understands the audience better than Disney ever will. While Disney still clings to the illusion of universal appeal, Owens plays to a base hungry for backlash, eager to see elites humbled, and ready to meme a movie into oblivion. And let's not pretend this ends here. The Snow White disaster is a template now, a warning shot. The next time a studio rolls out a reimagined classic starring an outspoken young activist with a Twitter history longer than their IMDb, this playbook will be dusted off. Owens will be waiting, the audience will be primed, and Disney? They'll probably still be writing apologies no one reads. Because in 2025, fairy tales don't end with true love's kiss. They end in quote tweets, boycotts, and box office carnage. Once upon a time, Disney made dreams. Now they make headlines, and Candace Owens makes sure they burn. What was meant to be a reawakening of childhood wonder became a slow-motion implosion wrapped in PR disaster and ideological warfare. Rachel Zegler thought she was stepping into a legacy. Instead, she walked straight into a landmine, a fairy tale repackaged as a battleground where every dress, every tweet, every eye roll becomes ammunition. This wasn't just about one movie, one actress, or one commentator. This was about the myth of cultural neutrality crumbling in real time. Because in 2025, you don't get to play Snow White without picking a side. And once you do, Candace Owens is already in the comments section writing your obituary, one get woke, go broke at a time.